Hi, everyone. This is Peter Csathy of Creative Media. That's creativemedia.biz. Welcome to another edition of my annual 10 predictions. And this time it's 10 predictions for AI, media, and entertainment in 2025. So let's get right into it. Prediction number one, courts will make their first fair use decisions and media will win more than it loses on the issue of fair use. The federal courts, and remember, we're at the district court level. Those are the lower federal courts. Then there's the Court of Appeals. Then there's the U.S. Supreme Court. But the federal district courts hearing the first generative AI infringement cases, those include the New York Times versus OpenAI, Dow Jones versus Perplexity, they'll make their first fair use decisions. And those initial decisions will come down mostly on the sides of the rights holders. In other words, rejecting generative AI company defenses of fair use. That won't mean that the fair use issue will be conclusively resolved, of course. Not all courts will reach the same decision, and generative AI companies on the losing end will certainly appeal. But initial court victories by the IP rights holders will have far-reaching implications, which means that we get to prediction number two. Generative AI companies will accelerate their content licensing activity. So media's initial legal victories on the issue of fair use that I just talked about, they'll immediately impact and accelerate the market for licensing content for generative AI purposes, significantly increasing the dollars and overall economics that flow to the rights holders. 2024 already saw an increasing number of deals between big tech and big media on the licensing side. But generative AI's insatiable need for fresh content for fine-tuning of their LLMs and for output/display purposes, some things like what Perplexity does, where they also scrape the fresh content of New York Times and others to bring real-time results. Those, coupled with these initial court decisions that I talked about, will significantly expand 2024's deal numbers and the dollars that flow from them. So that's prediction number two. So that brings us to prediction number three. Companies in 2025 will embrace the concept of ethical AI. Ethical AI is when meaning LLMs trained only on licensed content and also displaying content on the output side that has been licensed. That's already a major thing as a story, as it should be. But the prioritization of ethical AI will be a leading theme in 2025, fueled by the court cases that begin to beat back big tech's claims of fair use that I've already talked about. Any company that's operating in the creative community, in other words, where personal and human relationships matter, that's the studios and streamers as an example, will face mounting pressure only to work with ethical AI companies. But the call for ethical AI will go well beyond the world of media and entertainment. I recently wrote about one such ethical company called ProRata AI, which is a highly pedigreed company that's founded by Idea Labs' Bill Gross, and is also a company that's talked about pretty deeply in the media and entertainment business and already has several different partnerships with the likes of Universal Music Group and others. So that brings us to prediction number four. The industry, the entertainment industry, and the big tech companies that want to license their content will move toward a three-tier content licensing system that will ultimately be the solution for everything that I've talked about. Yes, 2025 will feature an increasing number of content licensing deals for bigger and bigger dollars between big tech and the tier one. So there's the tier one big media companies, so the major studios, the major streamers. But tier two, what I mean as those mid-tail media companies that also have valuable content for generative AI purposes, they will begin to join the fun too on the licensing side. So for mid-tier, for tier two companies, expect content pools, kind of akin to patent pools, that aggregate the content of multiple media companies to offer a strength in numbers approach that works for both the participating mid-tier media companies and the generative AI companies that need their content. Meanwhile, for smaller companies and smaller rights holders that still have valuable content, we'll begin to see the first automated opt-in licensing systems for those smaller tier 3 rights holders that boast that kind of compelling content. So there will be a need for these kind of automated platforms that are rising up, such as the Tollbits, which you may have heard of. That's Tollbit, which is a very, again, a highly pedigreed company that's coming out of Silicon Valley that's more in that automated kind of licensing space for generative AI purposes. So that's worth checking out. Which brings us to prediction number 5 for 2025. Media licensing for AI will trigger scrutiny on individual talent, name, image, likeness, and voice issues. If big media IP content rights holders decide to license their content libraries to big tech for generative AI training purposes, which, as I've said and predicted, they increasingly will, then individual celebrity talent featured in those licensed films and television series will expect to be paid as they should. In other words, name, image, likeness, and voice issues will need to be solved with consent and compensation. Actor deals, as an example, that are with the studios will not be enough to justify the studios licensing their content pool that include those actors and actresses and directors and other individual talent within them, because nobody anticipated that kind of use when it comes to signing up for a talent deal. That's very different when you're talking about breaking down individual personas, images, likenesses, voices, performances, breaking them down into dots, I's and O's, dots and zeros for recombining purposes via generative AI. That is fundamentally different than having a new form of distribution that technology brings to play that is something that could have been foreseeable when talent enters into a licensing or enters into a talent deal. So I expect this issue and those kinds of discussions when it comes to image, likeness, voice, and the need, the demand, the expectation for compensation and consent. Those discussions started to bubble up. I'm in the middle of those discussions. They've started to bubble up in the second half of this past year, but now I fully expect them to rise up to the top, and I'm involved in many of those kinds of discussions. I see that as a very big issue that's a sleeper under the radar, but will become much more in the kind of the zeitgeist for media entertainment in the world of generative AI. That brings us to prediction number 6. Entertainment will need new AI tracking, reporting, and payment systems. Content rights holders of all stripes will need to be paid when their content is used for LLM training and in connection with generative AI output and display. And licensing contracts and protocols will need to be enforced, because in these licensing deals between big tech and big media companies on generative AI, there are frequently protections in words via the wording that the outputs will not match or will not resemble the inputs for training purposes. But how do you enforce that? That's going to be a big issue. The expectation is there. Both sides likely would be, when they enter into that kind of a licensing deal, they will be operating in good faith. We need to assume that that's the case. But nonetheless, how do you actually enforce that kind of protection? That's going to be an important issue. For all these reasons, new companies will rise up to offer the content tracking and reporting systems necessary for a new economic model of the kind that I've already discussed to rise up and take hold. Vermilio, that's Vermillio, and Proterata AI that I already mentioned are two examples of companies that are working with major studios and music labels for these kinds of purposes of tracking, reporting, and then ultimately leading to the payment for the use of IP by big tech for generative AI purposes. So let's get to prediction number 7. The entertainment industry will more openly embrace generative AI in its workflows after quietly experimenting in 2024. Shh. Hear anything? Nothing but crickets so far for the major studios and streamers about Gen AI companies scraping their copyrighted works without consent and compensation. And there's a reason for that. Major entertainment companies want to use generative AI for myriad reasons, reducing production costs, speed efficiencies, all the kinds of things that you've probably heard and read about, but they haven't been willing to do it, at least openly. They've been quietly doing, but doing it openly due to understandable fear of creative community blowback, because the creative community is watching very, very closely, as I mentioned, and as they should. But 2025 will force the issue, and entertainment companies will reach initial understandings with individual talent and their guilds on how it can and should be done. So that's prediction number 7, which brings us to prediction number 8. The music industry will continue to act more aggressively towards big tech than other sectors of the media and entertainment world. The music industry faces even more existential questions posed by generative AI than the broader set of entertainment companies like the studios and streamers. And that's why we saw the major labels sue several generative AI companies like Suno and Udio for infringement in 2024, while the studios and streamers remained silent and did not get involved in that kind of litigation. Copyright litigation, infringement litigation. Music's more aggressive stance will continue in 2025, and relationships between the major music labels and generative AI companies will remain throughout the year mostly fractured. They and the artists they represent will expect to be paid and seek to find ways to stop the flood of endless AI-generated music that has begun to overrun Spotify and all the streamers. Now, by overrunning streamers with content that is not quality content, at least the vast majority of time, just volumes of content, that's not good for Spotify and the streamers. It's not good for consumer experiences. So it's in the interest of both sides, the generative AI companies and the music labels and the streamers, all of these companies, to work together to find solutions, because ultimately it all comes down to consumer experiences. And I'm directly involved at high-level discussions to try to help solve those kinds of problems. Which gets me to prediction number 9 for the year. The broader creative community will move past its initial AI shock and awe and begin to use generative AI at scale. Listen, everybody, and it's something I've talked about a long, long time. Generative AI is here to stay and is already transforming the media and entertainment industry. You know, I'm in the media and entertainment industry, and I've been working deeply in generative AI from the very beginning when ChatGPT came out and was announced now just slightly over 2 years ago, because I knew I've seen these kinds of cycles before with new technology that's fundamentally transforming the business. And I immediately embraced and internalized the fact that that's the case here, and at a scale and level that we still can't anticipate. So that tectonic shift can't be feared because it's here. We can't wish it away. So it needs to be met with what I call stoicism. You know, stoicism, AI, we accept that this is the reality. So how can we control how we react? We can educate ourselves. We can experiment with ethical AI solutions across all segments of the business, no matter what role you play. The creative community will respond with significantly more widespread use of generative AI for both creative and efficiency reasons throughout the course of the year. I'll give you one obvious use case that makes sense to me: helping to shatter writer's block, to give ideas. Doesn't necessarily mean that you take those ideas, but give ideas, ideas of how to move forward with different concepts. And then the human can take it from there to create something of great quality. That's just one example of a use that I see is being a very constructive use of generative AI. And there are many constructive uses. So I want to be very clear when I come to all these kinds of predictions that I'm bringing, that it's not about being negative to generative AI. Again, it's about, I'm stoic about it. I see great positive impacts or potentials with it. I'll give you another example. The musician Grimes, Grimes always been the great experimenter. What she used Gen AI very early on to create her own platform called Elf Tech, Elf, E-L-F, .tech, where she makes her voice and she makes stems of her musical works available to her fans and to anybody to come in and create on their own. So fans can create their own Grimes originated music. And if any of that music becomes commercially successful, then Grimes gets to share 50% of the revenues generated by that song that she helped empower through her voice and through her musical stems. Like, there's an exciting use case, a brand new revenue stream where the artist is in control, where fans get to participate. Nonetheless, even if they get to participate, they're still going to want to hear Grimes's fully original music. So it's not cannibalizing, it's expanding opportunities. I see that kind of idea of using generative AI as to enable building blocks of creation based on a certain originated idea, a certain artist, a certain ethos. Another example is Stephen King. Stephen King obviously has written, scores of books by now. Nonetheless, he's limited by space and time, but he may have endless ideas for other kinds of works that he just can never get to. Well, how about if Stephen King's able to make a theme, some characters available to the world, and the only demand would be that if it is used to create something that's commercially successful, a new creative work that's enabled, empowered by him to share in the revenues created by that, I think that's an exciting opportunity. So I see that these things are positives. My main point, and that's why I have predictions about it, that is that artists need to be, the creative community, the humans who enable the power of generative AI, they need to give consent and be compensated for the value that they enable, for the value that they help create. It can't just be that $1 trillion is invested by the big tech companies to create generative AI systems and then build the value just for themselves by taking the content they need and the IP they need to be able to bring value to what they've created on the tech platform side. That's my fundamental issue. And then finally, let's get to prediction number 10. Sora, that's OpenAI's video generator. Sora and other video generators will enable filmmakers to create the first real short films. OpenAI just a couple of weeks ago, unleashed Sora, the new publicly facing version, just a couple of weeks ago. And remember, just released ChatGPT, as I said, a little over 2 years ago. But in its just released version of Sora, which is the first one that's publicly available, Sora now enables 1080p videos up to 20 seconds in length. That's the current limitation. But can there be any doubt that AI's relentless power will be at a significantly higher order of magnitude by end of next year? So same time next year? Of course not. So expect Sora and the competing video generators offered by Google, Meta, and others to enable the creation of the first real high-quality short films of several minutes. Doesn't mean that you can press a button, just prompt that way, and then create a short film of high quality. There's an art to prompting and creating in and of itself. But Sora as a platform will be able to really, for the first time, enable short films on the way to being able to enable feature films in a time frame sooner than any of us anticipate, which again will not cannibalize the market for feature films that are of a quality that we would hope to see. But ultimately, these video generators will empower creators to pump out more volume of content. How good they'll be, we'll have to wait and see, but also at costs that are significantly reduced. Doesn't mean that it's going to take away the market for high quality feature films and video projects and other projects that every step of the way is a labor of love of the humankind. And by the way, for anybody who's interested in the power of just human creation and the power of mistakes and the power of error, the power of imperfection, you should read Rick Rubin, the great music producer's book about creativity. So anyhow, that's my wrap on my annual 10 predictions for the year. Let me know what you think. I'm very curious to hear what you think. As I said, I'm Peter Csathy, Csathy, from creativemedia.biz, B-I-Z. check out the website, check out what I do, check out what we do as a firm. And if you're interested in learning more, reach out to me at peter@creativemedia.biz. I'd like to hear your ideas. I'd like to hear what you think, your candid thoughts and feedback about what I was just talking about in terms of my predictions. But I'm excited for the new year. Consumer Electronics Show is right around the corner. So this is hopefully some helpful background to you going into those conversations. But the year is going to be fast and furious in so many different respects. It's going to be a transformational year across the board, politically, real worldly, in all kinds of different respects. But in the specific sector that I'm involved in, generative AI and how it impacts media and entertainment, we're going to see a lot of these kinds of changes coming down the pike in 2025. It's a very, very big year. Obviously, the movement's going to continue at an accelerated pace on an ongoing basis beyond that. But 2025 promises to bring all kinds of significant changes and surprises to the business. Let's all be stoic about it. Let's all be positive and constructive about it. And let's all be fair about it and make sure that everybody along the, in the overall ecosystem shares in the value that they help create. And then let's put human creativity still at the top of the creative food chain as it should be. And that's where originality really shines. AI is a powerful tool, but it is a tool. It is not a panacea. So with that, everybody, again, thanks for listening to what my predictions of the past. Thanks for reading my newsletter, The Brain, which you can find themediabrain.com, and that's on Substack. And I look forward to continuing the conversations and look forward to hopefully offering some insights all along the way going into 2025. Cheers, everybody. Happy New Year.